Hi everyone, welcome to the Guildford Games Festival interview sessions. We're here at Supermassive. I'm joined by Selen and Emily, who can intro themselves. I daren't. It's not my job to tell people who you guys are. Go for it.
Sure, so I go. Hello, I'm Selen. I'm a producer at Supermassive Games, and I've been here about 3 years now.
Hello, I'm Emily. I'm a production integration manager here at Supermassive Games, so I look after the animation and VFX teams here.
Amazing. So what we're going to be doing here, girls, and yes, we're going to talk about video games, of course we are, but we're just going to kind of cover a few of the women in games type questions and just go over a little bit of the experiences that we've had and the day-to-day workings of women in games. It's a very small topic. We're not going to be here for long. I'm sure it's fine. But with all of my interviews, I try to start at the start. So which game or experience gave you that kind of first spark that made you want to be in the games industry? Go on, Selen.
Should I go first? Okay, that's a tough one. So my earliest memories of playing games was Prince of Persia back on MS-DOS PC. So I don't know if it was that one, but then I played like Abe's Odyssey and then like Age of Empires, Roller Coaster Tycoon. I think all of that kind of gave me a feeling that, if I can, I would love to be a part of this. But I think we can come to this later, but I didn't really know I could be part of the development process. Like I didn't know much about the roles available. But yeah, I think those are the ones.
Yeah, and I think, talking about Abe's Odyssey, that's one of those games that really kind of crossed over. It was a cultural phenomenon, right? You could quote it and you could use the, funny little noises when you were talking with your friends and all that kind of stuff, and it became a bigger thing than just
Yeah. And I didn't pick up on like some of the kind of like cultural things in there, but when I look back, I was like, I was really impressed by it. Yeah. So yeah.
Game. What about you, Emily?
So my dad was always into a lot of PC games, so from a very young age I remember kind of like sitting with him at the PC and playing like casual games like Chips Challenge and stuff like that. But the first game I remember like really playing was Sonic Adventure on the Sega Dreamcast.
Nice.
And it's like such a core memory for me playing that with my brother, who was really young at the time, and giving him like an unplugged controller, thinking that he was controlling Tails, but Tails was really the AI character.
Safer to do it that way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I remember going on holiday and I was so obsessed with Sonic Adventure that we took it down, like we took the Dreamcast down to this like cottage in Devon, and it was like powered by this electricity meter that took like £1 coins. So like the power would go out and I'd like lose the game. And like even now when I look at like playthroughs on YouTube and stuff, it brings back like such this like rush of nostalgia.
And also got to get this done really quick before this power goes. It isn't a lot of money. That's amazing. And actually what's really interesting is that my upbringing was very, very similar, and I've often wondered if it was the reason that I love video games, whereby I was the firstborn, my dad loved video games, my brother didn't come until a little bit later, so I was bestowed all of the video game playing.
Yeah, 100%.
Very similar thing. Great fun, really great fun. Wonderful.
So, and the immersiveness of it, right? Like I could just get out of my life at the time, like being a teenager, going to school every day. It was just like a routine. But games really kind of gave you a way to just live in a different reality.
And it's the first time you get that hook, right?
Yeah.
The first time that you step away and think, oh no, I need to go back. I could be, wait a minute, I could be playing Tails. What am I doing? Yeah, absolutely. It's it does seem to be something that kind of pulls us through everything that we've done, prior to getting to games. There is this, there is, a medium that can grab you more than movies and grab you more than music and really make you feel something about,
Exactly.
holding it, tactile, etc. Cool. Okay. So what do you think as far as barriers, the games industry is a very different place to what it was when I joined, and there were very few women. I mean, when I first joined Cody's, must have been over a decade ago. Let's just leave it with that.
Can cut that.
Yeah, some time ago, last week, there were three of us. There were three women, and one of them has become an absolute, the sisterhood that we forged through being in that situation. But it's definitely changed in the, decade or so that I've been involved. There are a lot more women. We get to, kind of have more of a presence and a say, and we do all of these great women in games events, etc. But do you think there are any barriers currently that we could look at removing, things that might be holding people back from, or holding women back from getting into games?
Sure. So I went to quite a traditional all-girls school, and games was never marketed to me as a viable career. I don't think anyone ever said, like, you can work in games. I think when I was in my early years of secondary school, I took like a career quiz, and it told me I should be a hat maker, which for some reason seemed like more viable than working in any sort of tech-based career. And it was funny because the boys' school did subjects like computer science and media, but they weren't offered at my school. And I still think that remains a barrier today with especially getting young females into games. I read somewhere that young girls kind of start thinking about what they want to do in life when they're about 9, and I don't think anyone would consider going to primary schools and talking that tech careers could be a thing. So I think more outreach programs to younger females especially is something that would help kind of break that obstacle down.
Definitely. I completely agree, and same kind of thing. I remember getting to, must have been games, kind of Lionhead potentially, getting to a studio and talking to male friends who were saying, oh, we did this great thing when I was in junior school, we coded this and we made that work. And I remember thinking, I didn't do any of that. Yeah. And I didn't go to an all-girls school. So whether it was that we were actually split, in the classroom, and boys go off and play with the robots and girls go and learn how to make hats, I guess. Bonnets. Wonderful. Yeah, you're absolutely right. It's not there as that kind of first step. And I guess for girls like us, that means that our home life, playing video games with our dads, is that's just fun, because it's not spoken about anywhere else.
It seemed completely separate. It never kind of occurred to me at that age that was something I could do as a career. So I think definitely kind of more explanation as to what roles there are available and like how you can get there is definitely needed.
Yeah, definitely. What do you think, Selen?
I think in terms of career, there's one other thing, maybe like subconscious bias in terms of like hiring practices, because of all the sort of game dev veterans, they're mostly kind of male oriented. So if you look at that, and people who are doing the hiring as well, that could play a role subconsciously. But I think overall it's definitely going in the right direction. There's like a positive movement.
Yeah, leaps and bounds.
But I was talking to someone the other day, and they were saying like they are aware of this, and they're trying to kind of like have more exposure, just kind of following people like women in games on Twitter and stuff, like see what they're interested, and see more different profiles and people that like would actually be a great candidate for them. So kind of like changes their mindset a little bit. So I think that's cool.
And I suppose if you're someone that plays, it's a difficult thing to kind of put, but if you play mainstream games, right, as opposed to being in the industry, like, knowing about all of the indie games, being aware of lots of studios, being aware of lots of other developers, if you're just someone that is playing video games, enjoys and loves video games, but doesn't delve into kind of beyond the main marketed titles, when you see E3 or Gamescom, if you do happen to tune into something like that, you're most likely going to see the dude at the top of the table who's been looking after the game, who's been doing these interviews for years and years and years. And, we all know that being on stage, being in a live situation, having to speak about a video game can be a really or anything can be a really terrifying thing to do. So I understand why we tend to go with the old guard. But I suppose that's creating a bit of a mental barrier for anyone outside of the industry who may not know that there's so much more. And you can go to Supermassive's channel on YouTube and watch Women in Games panels, and you can go to plenty of other studios that are all doing similar things. I agree. That's we do have a little way to go. We've come a long way, but we've still got some things that we could be doing, definitely. Awesome. Okay, so if you are outside of video games and you maybe haven't learned or realised that video games are an option for a career, what kind of transferable skills might there be that you hadn't considered, or people hadn't considered, that could be great for games?
I think being inquisitive is really important in games. Then collaboration is also really, really important. So like being a good communicator and having some empathy about others, and some strong work ethic, trying to kind of like work towards a goal as a team and just believing that it's going to happen. I think those things combined together, you can get them from any other job or like studying experience, but I think they're really important as skills.
Agreed. What do you think, Emily?
Well, I actually came from film, so I used to work in the VFX industry for 5 years before I transitioned into games. And it was actually only after talking to a Women in Games ambassador that I thought, like, oh, this is something I could actually do, and I've got, the skills in production that I can transfer. So I think, as Selen said, like, being naturally inquisitive, a good answer to any question is, I'll get back to you on that. Like, that's kind of like the production toolkit, finding out the answers. And
leave it with me. I'll see
yeah,
what I can do. Yeah.
Yeah, like being that facilitator, basically. I think there's a lot of spinning plates that we have to manage. So any kind of job, I think actually I watched your talk before where you gave like the example of like a wedding planner or something like that. Anything where you're making these kind of decisions and juggling priorities is great transferable skills.
Yeah, absolutely. And I suppose if you're looking at, production as a role, you're absolutely right. It's your plate spinning. You're the thread that is holding all of the game together to ensure that it gets to the point that it needs to get to. Organisation, attention to detail, all of those things are fantastic kind of crossovers. But yeah, I love what you were saying earlier, Selen, that it's, the inquisitive nature to be, essentially a problem solver, that you need to be able to look at something and think, okay, this isn't a thing, a hard kind of thing that I can touch that exists. This is a very squashy idea that can still be pulled in directions, and you can have the ability to have that impact on the game as well, which must be really awesome. And I guess leading on from that, do you think your life experiences and ultimately as women, which we are, do you think your life experiences as a woman brings anything in particular to the game development process that others may not have?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, personally, my sort of cultural background and my upbringing just kind of gave me a lot, I think. Like, we've been brought up as a little bit like fighters. I'm from Turkey, but so, it's a male-dominated country, like kind of machoism and everything that happens in there. So all of those things, I think, adds up to your experience and then the way you deal with people later on in life, or the way you kind of talk to them and like try to understand where they come from and just be kind of diplomatic about things and find your way out of tough situations. There's loads of things like that that I had the experience dealing with when I was younger, so I learned how to deal with that already, make it a good thing or a bad thing, but I think those things are still kind of, helping me thread home.
Good things, 100%. Yeah, absolutely. And I think that is something that you do tend to find, and I'm not saying it's every woman that works in games, but there are a lot of us that are fiery, that are loud, that can stand on a table and say, okay, listen to me now, we need to do this because someone has to. And walking into a male-dominated industry, certainly a decade ago, you had to be that personality if you were going to get anywhere. If you were going to make a difference, you had to be a little bit fiery. Yeah, definitely. And I think it's definitely something that most women I've worked with in the industry have. But it's not necessarily something that they came with. I think a lot of people learn it as they go as well.
I think it's like inner strength as well. I wouldn't say I'm too fiery, for example, but I'm quite strategic about things. Like, I do think of loads of different kind of possibilities of kind of getting out of a situation or solving it. So those things definitely add up, and then the way you manage with situations just... how you handle them, kind of like you learn how to do it, basically. But kind of stamina, inner strength, resilience are really important, I think.
Yeah,
I'd agree.
No, I think definitely the same. You've got to have a degree of assertiveness, especially in this kind of male-dominated industry. But I guess on the kind of other end of the spectrum, I think everyone's probably like experienced at some point or another like a hot-headed manager or someone short-tempered, and I have luckily not experienced that in games, but from my past I have experienced that, and I kind of wanted to go forward and think like I'd always want to be someone that my team could approach and think is kind of kind and empathetic, someone if you've got loads of deadlines and your team's struggling, I always want to be that person that they can tell me like, oh, I'm going to need a bit more time on this, and we'll work together to solve a problem. Like, not someone that's kind of like afraid of coming to you.
Absolutely. And with producers, again, you know, I guess ultimately the buck stops with you guys. You know, although you're not physically making the game, you're making the game. You know, you are the people that ensure that every other part is ready to go and fits in. So absolutely, it needs to be. Certainly from you know, the role that you guys do, that problem solving element and the ability to, okay, you know, like we said, leave it with me, let me see what can be done here, and to be able to sit down and oversee the whole thing. To have a very calm and collected way to gather that information as well.
Decisiveness is important as well,
totally.
right? Like,
I feel like production, we're kind of responsible for kind of aligning those wild ideas of like the creative team and kind of essentially shipping the game. You have to say, this is where it stops and we're going to ship it now. I
can't imagine how difficult your jobs must get sometimes.
Yeah, it's hard to say no to people.
Exactly. I started out as, talking of transferable skills about 10 minutes ago, I started out in admin. I was one of the people that just got a job when I left school, and I hated it, and I'd wake up every morning and think, oh God, this is the rest of my life, what have I done? Until I realised that I lived near Guildford and all of this was going on, and I just hopped up. But yeah, absolutely, it's being in production, you know, as an administrator that moved over to, you know, essentially being a production administrator, looking after all of the producers at the studio I was at, and being in those triage meetings. It's like having your heart ripped out, knowing that there was something that you were just, okay, I can't wait until they get this in. I can't wait. It's going to be so great. It's gone.
And then it's gone.
It's gone. Yeah, heartbreaking, but for the right reasons.
Yeah.
So, ultimately. Awesome. Okay. And, you know, again, along those lines, so if you've got something as a producer that is a little bit difficult to communicate, how important is actually being with your team? You know, we've been through lockdown, we've all been ripped away from everyone, and now we've all slowly started to get used to coming back again. But how important is that face-to-face interaction in general?
I think it's integral to knowing how your team are, not just with how they're doing with their work, but also their well-being. Like speaking from kind of like a team manager's perspective, it's hard to gauge how someone's doing from behind a screen. You know, you can't really read their body language. Like, you don't know if they're staying super late unless they're telling you, or you're kind of like looking at what time they're on Teams. So I think that is like really, it's nice to be able to just go over to someone's desk and be like, how are you? You know, like, let's go for a cup of coffee or something. I think, you know, that is invaluable to managing a team.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I'm similar to Emily. Like, some of the best days I have are in the office, kind of talking to people in real life, looking at their screens, or just witnessing them like discussing an issue, kind of like little group with safe distance. So yeah, you just can't get that when you're working from home, and I think it really adds up to the experience and the motivation, team motivation overall. And it's such an important thing that I don't think you can let that slide or never have it. You know, there needs to be a way, maybe hybrid work situations, things like that. So yes,
it's something that I really struggle with, because we are, for the most part, work from home, and I quite often, again, being a talker, being someone that's quite happy to lead a meeting and throw myself in and, hey guys, what's going on today? Oh, sorry about the dog, you know, whatever's happening. Barking in the background, cats jumping on keyboards, all of that stuff. Quite happy to be in that situation. But I've noticed recently there have been a few instances where we don't have cameras on, and I'll say something, you know, ending a meeting or ask a question or whatever, and I'm met with deadly silence.
Yeah.
And it's not deadly silence. There are expressions. There's some, you know, someone's probably giggling. Someone's probably, you know, pointing at something or thinking, oh yeah, that would be, you know, and you'd be able to see it all, but without, you know, even over, you know, Teams or whatever, not being able to see someone makes so much of a difference to having those conversations. So frankly, the fact that you guys made and shipped a game in lockdown, amazing.
I know, yeah.
Absolutely amazing, incredible. I can't imagine. There are so many studios, Guildford studios, of course, you know, EA, for example, how those guys went about putting something together of that size with a team of that, you know, that magnitude, and all being spread across the south.
Yeah, it's no mean feat.
Insane. I mean, fantastic, and really is a testament not only to the games industry and the level of problem solving and creativity that we have, but also the modern world. Thank you, modern world, for letting us carry on. Good Lord. Fab, okay. So how do you think we can encourage, I loved what you were saying earlier, Selen, about your background and upbringing, and how do you think we can encourage people to, to kind of bring more diversity of story and experience to our studios?
I think the closer we get to the real life, because all of us were surrounded by people with, real people with amazing backgrounds or stories to tell, and if the games can get closer to that, I think we're really gonna solve this problem. I find in many games still the stories or the background of the characters don't have too much depth still, or not very realistic or relatable. So I think we just need to look back at our audience or the players and try to make it more relatable to them, and just very diverse setting and experiences.
Yeah.
Really.
Yeah, I think it all trickles through, doesn't it? Because the more people play video games and see people that look like them and have relatable stories, the more people we're going to get from diverse backgrounds into game development. So I think it all kind of the ripple effect.
It will feed itself almost once we start doing it. Yeah, I mean, kind of along those lines, I realised recently, and it may have been something that I've chatted at you guys about before, so apologies if I have, but I was diagnosed with ADHD last year, and realised since then that all of the music I really love, I think the individuals have ADHD, from listening to the lyrics and working out, thinking, oh, okay, I feel like that, or I think that, with the knowledge of a neurodiversity, has almost cemented my love and made me think, oh no, that's because they might too. And it's 100% the same with games. I mean, the thing that I find with video games sometimes is that I'm hapless. Lauran, the individual, she's hapless. She's going to fall over things. She's going to hurt herself. She's going to forget something. She's going to bumble a line. Something's going to go wrong. Every video game character I play is flawless. Yeah, I can't be that person. Do you know what I mean? I can't play Nathan Drake, even with his, idiosyncrasies and all of those things. But he's too strapping. He's too clever. He's too strong. I can't. That's not me. There are so many times when I think, oh, I'm so into that. And I go to play it and I'm like, oh no, I'm fumbling. I can't. Oh no, they're too cool. And I kind of stop, which is why I probably spend so much time in games like Animal Crossing and Stardew, where I am me, I'm being me, and that's a different thing. But yeah, I think you're absolutely right. It's about showing people themselves, and not just themselves as, oh, there's a woman, there's a complex character, there's a character that needs some understanding, that's going to make a mistake, that's going to say something that might not be right at some point, because we're human, not just as women, as humans. We're all kind of different personalities. So leading on from that kind of, complex character discussion, as a video game player, as someone that is making video games, what do you think needs to be portrayed more with our female characters in games?
It's a tough one, but I think, like you were just saying, complex characters are the way to go. So, and maybe some character arcs, you see someone as the way they kind of portray themselves, but that's not who they are exactly. It's kind of protection mechanism a little bit, and then you get to see their sort of weaknesses or vulnerabilities. I love that. I love being able to see that, and then you go on a journey with them, and then you discover things about them, and it's completely fine. They're imperfect. That what really makes me happy and makes me immersed in the game even more.
Imperfect is such a good way to put it. Yeah, human. Yeah, absolutely. What do you think, Emily?
I think, very similar to Selen. We need complex characters, women and non-binary characters that aren't just kind of props to the story.
Yeah.
They're their own entity. They're not just serving the story, they're driving it, sort of thing. How you've got the Bechdel test for film, maybe we should apply something similar in thinking in games. Is the story a woman thinking about a man, that sort of thing. I just think complex characters with more depth, as Selen was saying, that don't just kind of serve the story, they are driving it forward.
Aren't just there because we needed another character to make sure that this
there's a
comes
love
across.
interest,
not side characters. They're the protagonists. And
for sure, and really kind of building on the the depth, I guess, that's available in character creation, which is something that, I guess, talking about women in games and how far we've come and how there are definitely, that we're a much more even split now. It's not 50-50, but we're certainly a much more even split. But with the more, female scriptwriters and people, women that get involved in narratives, we'll get a lot more of this kind of complex character creation. But right now, the balance is still just ever so slightly out, I'd say, personally. But yeah, even like, I'm sure there'll be plenty of people watching this screaming out the names of female characters that they think are really, really, well written, complex, 3D, all of that kind of stuff. I still, even like Lara Croft, I think there's still something not quite right about Lara. She's great, don't get me wrong, she's fantastic, and the new creation of Lara is amazing, and she's such a badass, but there's still something that doesn't quite fit for me when I'm listening to her dialogue or trying to understand her story. So yeah, we've got a little way to go, but I think the other great thing, I suppose, is we're getting that diversity of story in indie games, in a lot of that kind of stuff. It's coming through, and the more you learn about developers and start to follow developers, female developers, non-binary developers within the sphere, the games industry sphere, you'll see more and more of these stories coming through. But the wider arc does, it needs a little bit of
and
attention.
even in like some of the more mainstream, like bigger audience games like Apex Legends, you've got like queer characters now, you've got non-binary characters. So I think, that's things like that are a massive step forward.
Yeah, and just on what you were saying as well, it's really important to have people like us, like getting a chance to speak up. So in my team, there's a narrative designer, and I remember clearly from back in concept phase, my director was like sort of letting everyone just say like, okay, what do you think? Tell us, what would you like to see here? And that sort of left an impression on me, and I think that was so valuable. And I could tell that she was sort of like growing her confidence in that and like speaking up and just telling her opinion on things. That's really important.
And that must be a really daunting thing to do, for yourself, Emily, coming from an entirely different, industry and stepping into video games and knowing that this is, a medium that you care about, evidently, that you enjoy, and also that it's got, that Guildford has these incredible roots, and the people that have been involved are still here, and all of these amazing games under their belts. And then to be able to be in a room where someone's saying, what do you think?
Yeah.
Must be a really difficult thing to go, okay, what do I think? How do I get this across to sometimes a room full of dudes who might not understand what I'm saying, where I'm coming from, why this is important to me. So yeah, giving those opportunities and, almost not rewarding, taking every single opinion seriously, because that's, we're a creative industry. We have to work together. There are no silly ideas. There's no such thing as too far-fetched. Throw it all in and then let's work out what can and can't be done, kind of thing. So that's really, really important, I think, that everyone gets a
and it shouldn't be the loudest in the room gets to speak and, tell their ideas all the time.
Absolutely. And going back on something that I said, being one of the louder women, I absolutely recognise when there is a quieter personality in the room and know that I'm like, okay, I need to give them this. I need to give them the floor and make sure that they've got the opportunity. Otherwise, I'm just going to keep
I do that
talking.
too. Yeah.
Because it is, in that instance, it's confidence. And because we're doing all of this cool stuff and because we're working with this amazing, cutting edge, groundbreaking technology, it's about building up each individual to be able to put something out there. Because as we've discussed with triage, sometimes things just don't make it. So it doesn't matter if it is a fantastic idea, it might not even make it. Let's do what we can do and get it done, to the best. Yeah, very, very important. I love that. Okay, well, let's go with something a little bit more fun. Favourite female character in games? Uh-oh.
So you already said Lara Croft.
What
so
have I done?
You badmouthed Lara Croft. But I saw the look. But I do get what you're what you're saying with something not being quite right. But I think for me, she may not be my favourite, but she was definitely like the first. I remember my dad buying me like a Lara Croft game, and I was like, wow, like this is a game where like I'm playing as a female, like that's amazing. And I think even though her kind of attributes have changed over the years and like over different series, she's still quite fairly rooted in kind of like ambition and intelligence, and like, you know, she speaks several languages, her hair's back in a ponytail.
She is smart.
Like, she's not like super glamorous. Like, I think that's I think that kind of had quite an impact on me when I was young. But then obviously, like, games like The Last of Us, like, especially seeing queer characters as well, that's been like a massive thing.
And the kind of, you know, the real life mirroring of everything that was going on as well. You know, it was really, really interesting to be able to see that kind of realised character in a video game and then understand the background of the individuals involved and everything. Yeah, very cool, very cool.
She speaks different languages as well, right?
Yeah,
she can read. Yeah, that's
and
very
she
cool.
can lock butlers and fridges.
Yeah, that helps.
Yep. And she was in Spaced. That's, I mean, they're therefore famous.
Yeah.
Never mind video games. What about you, Selen?
Mine is, I think, I'll go for Chloe Fraser from Uncharted Lost Legacy, where we actually kind of seen her a bit better or understood her character a bit better. But she was in earlier Uncharted as well. I loved her because I think kind of like background-wise and kind of maybe looks, appearance-wise as well, I could relate to her. And she was a character, like I was telling earlier, complex, you can tell, but she was quite competent and witty, and it seemed like she was only thinking about her sort of own thing, but as you get to know her, she actually becomes like, shows that she's a selfless character. So I really like that. And Cassandra from Assassin's Creed Odyssey, I think. That was a good one.
And going back to the kind of witty element of female characters, it's not just snark, guys. Like, it can't just be snark. It needs to be more than that. It's not just, oh, she's a bitch and she's done with the world and therefore she's going to call you guys names and say things under her breath. No, it needs to be cleverer than that. It needs to be that she's, you know, for me at least, that she's balanced, that she's a character that may well be very upset with the world, but you don't know about it until she's having a moment on her own and she's explaining something to another character or whatever. Yeah, absolutely.
Exactly.
Wowzers. You guys are so lucky. When I was coming up, when I was growing up, Tails was probably the closest I got to a female character. I think that may have been
or
it.
Amy, maybe.
Yeah, absolutely.
but she's still pink.
Absolutely, yeah, pink and pretty.
What is yours now?
You know, it's a really tough one, and I do love new Lara. Like, don't get me wrong, and of course I hold a very dear place for old Lara. Young Lara? Old Lara.
Low poly Lara.
There you go. Old school.
That's a good way.
I think she'd be up there, but ultimately I find myself playing so many more video games that are indie, shorter, mainly because of, you know, I just don't have the time. When I think, aside from Animal Crossing, I'm probably up to nearly 1,000 hours. But when I see a video game, you know, Blockbuster, all of the big ones that are going to be, you know, 100 hours, I think, when am I going to do that? And it quite often puts me off. And then I find myself becoming really attached to video games, like, let's hark back to something that's pretty old school, Thomas Was Alone, where I don't even need to think about, aside from the name, whether they're male or female or anything. And I'm just playing a game and I'm enjoying it, you know, and not really thinking about it. But as far as, yeah, I mean, it's something that I've probably discussed so many times, but as far as when I was a kid having that awakening, it was, this is awkward, I can only remember her brother's name. Zeke and, it will come back to me, the sister in Zombies Ate My Neighbours. The fact that I could play with my brother as a female character, even if it is only top down, and I'm her and you're him, and you go and do whatever you're doing, but I'm being her, was just like, blew my mind. And you know, I suppose it's a funny thing coming up as playing video games in the 90s and kind of late 80s. Whether it's because I was a tomboy, I don't know, but I never viewed myself as Princess Peach. Do you know what I mean? I was never the princess in peril in the tower. I'm the plumber. I got stuff to do.
The damsel in distress.
No.
I just thought of another one. Indie game Florence.
Loved.
I love that game. Made me cry.
Yeah, me too. Absolutely loved that game.
Yeah, that was cool too.
And what's the interview one that's really her? Is it just her?
Yeah, Her Story.
Her Story.
Yeah.
I loved that as well. I loved that, like really getting an idea of that, you know, and again, short space of time to get an idea of that character. But you get a good understanding of her. Yeah. And Gone Home. It's another female-led, fantastic video game, I thought. I digress. I could do this forever.
Talk about it,
I could do this forever. So let's do the super important one, which is if anyone's out there watching this interview and thinking, you know what, I want to work in video games, what would you say to them?
I want to go first.
Sure. I guess, however daunting it may seem, try not to be afraid if something seems difficult. You can forge your own path. There's so much out there in terms of resources now that I didn't have, 10 years ago, like the Women in Games groups, Into Games, POC in Play. There's so many different people out there that are willing to help mentor and give advice. So I think if you're struggling to find accessible resources from a school, or you're struggling because you want to change careers, there are so many people out there that you can reach out to that will gladly give you advice and help.
Yeah, definitely. Just to echo Emily, I don't get discouraged. Just keep applying, and networking is quite important. Twitter is actually, I discovered it quite late, but there's loads of
there's so many people on Twitter who are willing to help.
Exactly, and
they
you
really
can
are.
follow kind of like the expos and stuff that they're attending. You can get free sort of career advice or CV check and things like that. I think Into Games does that. Then I was actually Into Games, the website resources, amazing. I was recommending it to somebody who had a daughter, like teenage daughter. They have Explore Careers section, and then they sort of explain the key bits about each role and industry. And then they have, you would love this if you're interested in this. And then they had like age brackets, like if you're within this age bracket, you could do this to kind of prep yourself to get into that role. And that's something that I guess we wish we had.
Yeah, 100%. I wish I had something
yeah.
like that I could look at and go, oh, actually, like I don't necessarily need to take, computer science as my A level. I can try and do it this way instead. I wish I had someone telling me like, oh, actually, like no, you can go a different way about it. You can move from your industry that you're in, or you can study something else and move later.
Yeah, me too. Then there's Into Gaming. I think they're quite cool as well. And then, sorry, I keep going on about it.
This is what we want, Selen. This is precisely what we want from you. It's wonderful.
And there's Discord channels, right?
There's so many good
Discord
Discord as
My
well.
goodness. How quickly did that become something that you can't live without? Because it certainly became real quick, like, oh, wow, these communities are
And it's a
vital.
little bit overwhelming, though, because like pings from every single one of them. But no, that's pretty cool. It's just networking and just being out there, I think, and learning as much as you can, and kind of making yourself out to be like a great candidate fit for that role.
Yeah, I couldn't be a bigger advocate of networking, and it, as you said, doesn't need to be face to face. It can be on Twitter, it can be in a Discord, it can be, at an event. I suppose if you see a developer that you admire, never, shy away from speaking to them. I've been privy to so many of those situations where one tiny little interaction ends up with, a fantastic career, just because you put yourself in that situation. You went and spoke to someone, you showed that you were passionate about something, and I think that's. Yeah, really, really important. Ladies, thank you so much for taking some time to talk to us. I really appreciate it.
Thanks
for having us.
Girls, woo.
Yay.
The girls. Yeah.